I get to ask a few questions to these guys, and so we saw all these very innovative business models you guys have, and we have in the room also people that come from so-called traditional businesses, so traditional book publishers, traditional music records, labels, etc. And what do you think you guys are going to replace the traditional models, or are you guys going to complement them? It's, you know, it's an open discussion, so it's not like...
We're allowed to talk now.
Exactly, you have to talk now.
Okay.
Get them some coffee!
I mean, you are going to kill the whole big business.
A lot of people say that. A lot of people say, you're going to kill those labels, and I love you for it. And I love them for thinking that we can, but we won't. We see ourselves as a trampoline at the beginning of the value chain, helping artists to make that first step in the career, and then labels can see, okay, Julia Marcel, for instance, Universal and Sony, they're all talking to her and trying to see if they can sign her and take her to the next level. But with $50,000, come on, you're not going to make a megastar. It's not going to work.
So it's a different part of the market you're going to take care of. It's like you guys, when you see the publisher starting to work for you, but with you, and you get the agency starting to use your system to pitch to the clients, but it's more going to be like a collaboration and something they do on the side. They will still interact with their client in a normal way, a traditional way, right?
I mean, ideally, we've worked with agencies, you know, and I think any business that hasn't changed their model in the last 50 years, or even in the last 10 years, is in trouble. So traditional businesses should be, or will be, adopting all of these models, and I think probably, you know, the forward-thinking ones will be incorporating them first, and then, you know, then the wave will follow. But keeping the sea at bay, as you well know, here in Holland, doesn't work.
Okay.
Also, I'm not presuming that we are going to replace like big studios as Pixar, DreamWorks, Disney. But on the smaller scale, if you look at what happens in the Netherlands, the two open movie projects from the Blender Foundation are actually the only two studio-level animations, 3D animations, being produced in the Netherlands in the past years. If you look at Wikipedia, the Dutch film, there are 120 films listed, and 2 of them are ours. And we didn't get the support from the typical film funds or that kind of things. We did this by community funding. And that's new, and that's interesting.
And in book, when I first founded the company a couple of years ago, I thought we would be the devil to mainstream publishing. But in fact, that's not the case. To my surprise, they're calling us to partner with us because they recognize that their economics only enable them to do a very small number of books, and yet they have a very large audience. So they are looking to partner with Blurb, not dissimilar to Sellaband, where they can discover new artists and new voices, because when you use our product, you keep the copyright to your work, so you are welcome to do a book deal with a mainstream publisher if someone approaches you. So,
Matt, I mean, the Hollywood studios are well known for their unlimited love with new technologies. How do they view your project? I mean, how many lawyers from these guys came to see you?
Well, I know that there's always kind of, you know, big studios trying to sneak in and look at the site and see what they can, you know, take for their own ends, basically. But you know, it's well known that there's a crisis in the film industry at the moment. You know, the model's not working, the theatrical model's not working for them, so they're completely trying to change their business model. What's happening with Hollywood is that they're retrenching and they're going, you know, to do what they do best, which is blockbusters, which is about mass marketing, reaching mass audiences. But on the lower end of the scale, for independent media, actually going to a theatrical run, it's a loss leader and it's kind of dead in the water now. So really for kind of more independent film creators and media creators, it's about, rather than trying to replicate the model that Hollywood has got, which works for them, doesn't work on a smaller scale. So you want to go directly to your audience. It's because, you know, with big media and small media now, it's all about audience engagement and community engagement. And, you know, if you can, as a creator, go directly to your audience, then you can create more value that way.
Yeah, okay.
Plus, because you can, there's always with the internet, everything can be copied very easily, and it's all, but you can never copy creativity. What you're doing, I mean, you're making money with the creativity behind making a film, you know, and that can't be copied because it's unique.
We have actually had agencies try to copy our model. Network agencies literally take the model and try to replicate it. They wouldn't use us, they wanted to control it and have it in-house. And it didn't work, and because they weren't able to attract the creative talent, because it takes a whole background engine to customer service, basically, creatives and companies, and you just need to have really high-touch relationships, which I guess they weren't willing to invest into, or for whatever reason. But I think the learning here for these companies is that you have to give up a little bit of the control to get a lot back. And coming from the music industry, you might agree, you know, had the record labels consolidated, whatever, 10 years ago and said, we want to create a platform, they would now own much more than the 5% of transactions. And I think equally in my business, you know, if businesses allowed for change to come in, at some point they would be able to control it more and own it. But, and, you know, if I were from a traditional business, that's what I'd be doing. But it's easier said than done, obviously.
So you guys have one edge on all the traditional players, is that you leverage the creativity of hundreds, thousands of people, right? But they have one edge also on you. It's about the promotion and the distribution, right? Because the challenge for Sellaband artists is to basically get their record in a local store, and for you it's going to be to get the movie in front of people. And what's for you, it's going to be like, I write a book, I want it to be sold sometimes, it's only part of your business. How do you handle that? Do you help your customers with distribution and the promotion? Do you have some mechanisms in place for that?
Yeah, what we found out is that we're really good at selling parts. We're good at helping artists hit that 50,000, and we're good at producing these albums, but we're not so good at selling music. What we're noticing is the music on Sellaband is only 50 cents, but everyone's downloading it on iTunes, because iTunes is geared to selling music. So we made a partnership with Amazon in Germany, in England, and we're close to finishing one in the States. And we made a partnership with The Orchard, who sells our music to like all these, you know, iTunes, eMusic, Rhapsody. You need to partner. That's the short answer.
Matt, how are you going to get the movies?
Remixing the cinematic process so that you can you make a film. You know, we're making a film which actually engages with the digital age world, which is all about sharing and participation, and that's why it's the pre-funding model. We're basically, you know, it's a subscription community which helps pre-fund the whole production process, and you know, members obviously get, you know, certain benefits out of that, besides the fact that they can participate and help shape the film. But it also allows us to benefit from hyper distribution at the end of it, at the end of the process. We can actually give the film away for free, and it's all about the attention economy. You know, Google has taught us that it's about the attention economy, and it's about what we can now do to kind of monetize that and help you know, make something.
Yeah, for sure. When we first started Blurb, we thought that the challenge was going to be printing, and in fact, it's difficult to get the quality, but that's not the challenge. The challenge is distribution. Because when you make a book, it's all about sharing the work, right? Whether that's for profit or just to share with friends and family. So we knew from the very beginning that we needed to tackle this piece of it. And the sad little secret in the traditional book business is the author, the creator, typically sees maybe $1 on a book that may sell for $30. And that's because there are so many people in the food chain that need to get paid. So we wanted to disintermediate all of that and just go direct from the creator to their audience so that the creator keeps most of the profit, right? So the way to do that was to create our own distribution model, but also to partner with additional people, right? So when you make a book at Blurb, we offer not only the bookstore, but all kinds of tools that enable you to get the word out virally on your MySpace page, your Bebo page, whatever, as well as promote yourself at Blurb.
You do Twitter, of course.
And Twitter, of course, yeah, sure.
Your Web 2.0.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Sure.
We're going to take a question from the audience. If you want to ask a question, raise your hand. Before that, I'd like to talk about the people. So all you guys rely on a lot of people. And let's talk a bit about the motivation of these people. And let's talk about, I really wonder if your models can scale. Because I put myself in the position of a client, like I get 1 week to get a brief, and I receive 5,000 offers at some point it kind of becomes counterproductive a bit. And for you, Matt, if you have like some people who really don't agree or something, do you think your model can scale? And then I have a side question, but it's only for me. Do you think it can work in France where people get on strike all the time? It's like for my personal culture. But do you guys think your model can scale?
Yes, indeed. I mean, it's all about getting the word out there and showing that crowdfunding, let's take it on that scale, you know, crowdfunding. Can crowdfunding work? Yes, it can work. We've proven that it can work. It just needs to, you know, more people need to trust the system, and then it'll scale by itself.
But if every day you get like 5,000 new artists submitting some tracks, then people cannot listen to everything, right? So how do you think the filtering is going to be less quality the more people you have? This kind of
the big challenge is finding the balance between the wisdom of crowds and the wisdom of experts. And if you can combine those on a platform, then you'll grow very quickly, I think.
Obviously, Matt, you talked about that, balancing the number of people and matching people with something to do. That's what you didn't like in your community, was to have somebody who has nothing to do, because it kind of becomes counterproductive. That's why you monitor the growth.
Yeah, it's interesting what I think Clay Shirky touched upon it you know, earlier in the conference about the evolving physics of collaboration and participation, and it is, you know, it is real balance, and that's why, you know, there's been very controlled growth within my community. You know, it's very different from what Pim's doing with Sellaband, because Sellaband is, you know, it's a marketplace and it's easy to scale up very quickly. With what I'm doing, it's more about everything's centered around an artist community, and it's developing its own internal ecosystem, which is, you know, processed from ideation, from like a kernel, you know, seed kernel of an idea, and producing throughout the whole process. So it's kind of incredibly vertically integrated. So you really got to control the growth of that, and build the community in the core, just in the same way that Linux did, you know, for example, where, you know, you have programmers who move up via meritocracy through the system, they contribute code, you know, they get recognition for that, and then they become committers. They can actually commit to the cause.
So you need to like rank the quality of the contributors somehow, so that you can filter who has more weight in the process, right? That's the key. Katarina, do you plan to limit one day the number of people who can respond to a bid, for example?
We don't actually, no. And for us, the first challenge was getting the people on board and, you know, gaining their trust, because what they're giving you is their most valuable asset, is their intellectual property. And you know, before we even started selling, so it would be, give us your ideas, enter ideas into our gallery, sign up, and we'll start selling your work in a couple of years when we have enough of you. And, you know, I knew the first 100, 200 personally from my previous lives from a network, and I would literally go out and say, please give me your work. I will treat it well. You know me. I will treat it well. And, you know, that had to carry on. That's what had to scale, is that we still retain these high-touch relationships. Each of our creatives knows one of us by name, and that we do protect their work. And really, at the end of the day, we're an intellectual property rights transfer company. We're not really a creative company. Our creatives are. So, you know, with us, it's also really difficult to strike the balance between endeavoring to enable people to collaborate, which we don't at the moment, because actually the property issues need to be really sorted, and, you know, delivering a clean idea to the customer, and doing all of that online, and ensuring that people, you know, the 11,000 worldwide understand confidentiality, and that they're in the same, really in the same relationship as they would be with an agency and a client offline, that really they can't disclose. Even if they're sitting on the Isla Margarita off Venezuela, we do have creatives entering work from, they need to respect that confidentiality. It may actually be easier than in Soho in London, where everybody goes to the same pub. But, you know, that's our issue, gaining their trust and, you know, continuing that education, so as not to sound too presumptuous, to empower them to understand these issues and to be business-wise about their ideas.
I think it's interesting what, you know, from my personal perspective, in terms of crowdsourcing within a community, you know, it's we've really been, you know, building the community up around a particular project. You know, it's just one model of what you can do in film. But what Ton has done is, you know, is very different. You know, you already had the community, didn't you, through the software?
Yeah.
And now you're moving that into content.
I wanted to say something about that. I mean, the scalability of the size of the Blender community was from the beginning a problem. that there was first a company trying to get everything controlled. But when Blender became open source, it was my purpose strategy from the Blender Foundation to only focus on the community as in the people who want to be involved with helping it. But the community as in people who like to enjoy using it, whatever, that's gigantic. And we didn't support them except for providing them downloads and documentation, but especially helping independent communities to grow out of it. And so that at the moment there are hundreds of independent Blender communities, like local Chinese communities, Philippine communities, communities of architects, communities of all kinds of different special interests, and we leave it to them also to develop business. So on blender.org you don't find banners, we don't have any commercial offering, we don't do anything of that. We hope that other people pick it up. And that works really well for scalability. And that's a good thing which you can do as an open source project, but as a company it will be very difficult because companies want to control everything.
And with Blurb, it's all about scale. So we're already achieving some scale.
Exactly.
But that's because we knew from the beginning that when you make physical products, you have to limit the choices. It's like Henry Ford in the United States said when he first developed the automobile, you can have any color you want as long as it's black. Yeah, so you can have any book size you want as long as it's one of these four. Because otherwise the tyranny of choice sets in, too many options. So it's all about scale for us.
Of course, and anybody who has ever had to print something like a conference program knows how challenging your business must be. Do we have a question from the audience?
One or two, but we more or less have to wrap up. So.
One or two?
Whenever you do something that's crowdsourced, Matt, obviously it's difficult managing the expectations of people who are contributing. With 1,000 members of your community, how exactly are you going to manage those expectations? And obviously there's going to be some disappointed people that aren't going to have their contribution in the final film. How will you manage that?
Well, first of all, I think, there's a big, management of expectation in the terms of, when people are online, people want everything on demand and they want it straight away. And if you're involved in a, complex creative process, then you can't do that. So really, what I've learned is that you really need to try and chunk stuff down and kind of drip feed and show that there's results happening and that actually people's contributions are making things happen. And again, I think Blender have done that really well. So I think that's really key. But in terms of kind of moving up in the community, yes, we're kind of 1,000 plus now. We need 25,000 people to greenlight the film, but not everybody wants to participate in the same way. So, there's different levels of collaboration and participation. And it's just about being diplomatic about it and being transparent and open and engaging with your audience.
We have time for one last question. Don't be shy. Okay. So I get to ask one more question if nobody asks a question. Okay. Oh, we have a question. Right.
So I understand that you're from the ad company, that your content is really valued as good. But for the others, how do you know that your content is really good and it's not trash? A lot of people like it, but is it good content?
I think it's for you.
If our content is okay? It seems to be valued, yes, by companies, because these are professional creatives. And, honestly, when we started out, I thought we'd have more of the, anybody can be creative phenomenon going on. And really we don't, because the process is such that it will eliminate people who don't have a certain amount of experience in advertising, because they need to be able to understand a brief and respond to it. And we do have an extensive vetting process, and I don't know if we have time to go into that, but just very basically we have a two-tier vetting process. One is for language. We translate all the ideas into English. We have a fully parallel Spanish website, so that we want all of them to be presented in let's say, native speaker language, so they all come across as equal with regard to that parameter. We filter for legal issues and so on. So that's one tier of our filtering system. Then we have what we call an academy of professionals that filter each of the ideas that comes through for professional presentation and quality. So each idea gets graded on 3 levels, and then there's an average grade, a benchmark that will allow the idea to be passed on to the client. So we do have a quality assurance process. It's not as strict and rigid as it would be in an advertising agency where literally only 1 or 2 ideas get presented and maybe you'll have had more on the table. We didn't want to do that. We didn't want to judge the ideas. We wanted the company, the client, to be able to do that, and we find that they find it empowering. If they want the ideas narrowed down, we bucket them as well. So, you know, we do again have a quality assurance, but at the end of the day, it's a marketplace, and you know, you will get amongst the 500 ideas, sometimes several hundred that fit the brief, and sometimes 100 that fit the brief. So, you know, in that, there still is an element of openness. Have I answered your question? Okay.
User-generated content always has this kind of reputation for being bad. People say like online, half of the content is bad, but every time I turn my TV on, I think like 95% of the content is crap. Well, I think and in some countries, like in Korea, there is no more difference between user-generated content and like journalist content in the media, for example. So, thanks to our great panelists. Please give them a big round of applause. Katarina Skoberne, Pim Betist, Eileen Gittens, Matt Hanson, and Ton Roosendaal.